Welcome to Cinemaholics. I'm John Negroni, and today we are diving into September 5, or 5th, either way. It is a gripping new film that takes us back to the 1972 Munich Summer Olympics, where sports coverage took an unprecedented turn into live global news reporting during one of the most tragic and pivotal events in media history. Joining me for this conversation is the insightful and always delightful Emma Sasek. Emma is a reporter for the Desert Sun and a contributor to Next Best Picture, as well as the co-host of her own podcast, Weekly Pop. Welcome back to Cinemaholics, Emma. How are you doing?
I'm so wonderful. My goodness, always delightful and insightful. This is so much pressure on me. I do not like all the pressure that you're putting on me today.
Well, yeah, I was telling you before the recording, too, that this would probably happen because, we're talking about a suspenseful, thrilling movie. It's media-related, so we gotta get the vibe right.
Exactly. So we're here. We're going to have a lovely time. Thank you so much for having me back. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, I was very stoked that you were able to make this just because, in terms of people to talk about a film that has to do with reporting and all these like really interesting questions about the media and stuff, you are, of course, knee deep in the media for sure. And so I can imagine you have a lot of insights in that realm.
I do. So that makes me even more excited to be here because I felt the stress that these people were going through because I was looking at myself too.
Now, before we get into the podcast itself, first of all, Emma, I know you are working on a lot of stuff for both kind of getting our award season coverage going. I wanted to mention that we're going to have your link tree in the show notes. So if people can find your work, your reviews and everything, but how's the award season going for you? How, just in general?
It's busy. We were just chatting a few minutes ago that we're both trying to figure out what to watch right before the deadlines are over. And even when we get to that point, we are not going to be able to see everything that's on our list. I somehow have a list of needing to watch 20 movies in like 2 days, and it's not going to happen for me.
And that's saying something because I know, you went to some festivals this year, I want to say.
Yeah.
And so you definitely were able to see some things ahead of time. I have been horrifically lazy in 2024. I was just looking at the stats, and I'm trying to dogpile all these movies now. But I legitimately, this is the lowest amount of movies I've watched in a year since 2014, which is, it's pretty bad.
Why are you so lazy?
Well, that's a great question. I've been asking myself.
Let's expand.
No, and I've told the listeners of the show too, I've been stepping back quite a bit from film coverage and, purposefully and focusing on other things for sure. But it's kind of nice because then award season comes around and then I have so many fun things to watch.
That's true. No, that's great. I'm still very much in the mindset of let me just do this every single week, going to theaters, seeing what's out there. If I'm lucky enough to be able to go to a film festival that, of course, gives you like 4 to 5 movies to watch every day, bags down to like my chin at a certain point. But I feel like I've been doing fairly well. I do still have some outstanding things to watch, a lot of things that have yet to be released in theaters. But again, we're very lucky to receive screeners this time of year too. So that makes the task a little bit easier. But as I've said, there's just still so much to watch. And even though I'm not going to get everything by the time that my ballot is due, it's nice to still have the rest of the month just to watch things for my own top 10 list and all of that stuff. But I suppose it's a fun challenge, but I very much understand you wanting to maybe step back to figure out some other things in life.
For sure. Yeah. Life stuff is there's always stuff going on. And, I will be going to Sundance in person this year in January, which I'm so excited. I haven't been in person in so long. And I'm hoping to, because I remember the last time I went in person, I think I saw like 30-ish movies and it was so fun. So I want to do that again while I have the chance.
While you don't sleep whatsoever.
Right. And I know that's where I met a bunch of Next Best Picture folks for the first time. That's where I met the Oscar expert. It's always just fun hanging out with people there. But before we get to all that stuff, I know for me, I'm curious what's on your short list. I have to mention that this is your Cinemaholics hat trick.
Yes.
So we've had you once a year on the show since 2021, but you missed 2023. It's my fault, obviously, for not inviting you on as much as possible. Okay. So sorry. But we've invited you on every like November or December. So you first came on for Titan. I'll never forget that.
Yes.
That movie, I think about it all the time. But then after that, we had you on a year later for The Menu, and holds up. Just saying, The Menu still kind of it cooks like with fire.
And this year, Nicholas Hoult having a fantastic year with Nosferatu, The Order, and Juror number two. Yes. Yeah. So once again, he's having a great time.
Yes, and it's his year, right? I think for Anya Taylor-Joy, I mean, besides Dune Part 2,
and Furiosa,
Furiosa, there it is. Yeah, it's like I know there's something else, but anyway, yeah, this is your hat trick, and I'm looking at kind of like my list for what I still have to watch. Please don't yell at me. Still haven't seen Wicked. I have the screener too. I just keep being like, well, I could watch Wicked, but I still really want to watch Kneecap because it's shorter. I want to get to that.
I can understand that, because actually the other night I literally made that same exact decision. I'm planning on watching this film today, so please also do not yell at me, but I still have yet to see The Seed of the Sacred Fig.
I haven't seen it either.
Okay.
I know it's up there for me right now.
It and Wicked has pretty much the same runtime, like 2 hours and 40 some minutes. And so I looked at that and I said, okay, but Kneecap is only an hour and a half. I could squeeze that in tonight. And so I made that exact same decision.
Yeah. And I'm nervous. I was nervous about it too, because I was like, oh no, what if this replaces Anora for like my movie of the year? That's always a possibility. Yeah, I still have A Complete Unknown, which I have ready to go screener wise, and Nosferatu I'm ready to see. So I'm trying to prioritize those two. But I gotta say, the movie that I keep kind of being like, oh, I just finished Brutalist.
Okay.
Which took me forever because that movie is so long. Unbelievable. But you mentioned Juror number 2. I really want to see that, like ASAP.
Okay, you still haven't. Yeah, we have a little bit to catch up on.
I'm so behind. It's pretty bad. What's the one though that you're kind of like, all right, I can't miss. You haven't seen it yet, and you're besides Seed of the Sacred Fig.
Yes, so my to-do list for today includes Seed of the Sacred Fig and A Complete Unknown. Both films are like 2.5 hours long, so we have to strap in. I have a few international features that I need to see too, such as The Girl with the Needle, Armand. If I have a screener for Green Border, I'd like to check that one out. I've heard very, very good things about that. And then I kind of want to revisit a few things as well, such as Queer. I was able to go to Venice earlier this year, and that was one of the films that I saw, and it was an interesting watch. I don't know if you've had a chance to see Queer yet.
No. I've heard middling things so far. I'm kind of nervous about it.
Yeah, so it was a film that I watched it, and I kind of said this is like movie number 537 at this point in the week, so I really need to give this another chance. So I'm hoping to do that as well this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that was told to me was if you loved Challengers, you're probably going to prefer Challengers over it. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I'm ready to be surprised because you know me and Luca Guadagnino, we're like this. But all right, I guess with that, we can get right into our review of September 5. You ready to go?
I'm ready.
All right. So, okay, September 5 or September 5th, whichever. It was directed by Tim Fellbaum, and it follows the ABC sports broadcasting team in 1972 Munich as they were thrust into the chaos of reporting live on the hostage crisis involving Israeli athletes. It's a moment that not only changed the course of the Olympics, but forever altered how live news is handled. At the heart of the story is Jeff Mason, played by John Magaro, a young but ambitious producer trying to prove himself to his boss, the legendary TV executive Rune Ulrich, portrayed by Peter Sarsgaard, not Scars. Add in Leonie Benesch as a German interpreter, Marianne, and Ben Chaplin as Jeff's mentor, Marvin. And you've got a cast navigating intense moral decisions, high-stakes reporting, and the very human costs of covering a tragedy. The film raises timeless questions about the role of the media in moments of crisis, and it's going to be opening in limited release on December 13th before expanding wider in early January of next year. So Emma, what did you think of September 5? I believe this one came out at Venice this year, the 81st Venice Film Festival, and that's where you saw it, correct?
Actually, I did not get a chance to see it at Venice
Oh,
just
okay.
because I had to prioritize a few other things. This was one of the films that I just watched earlier this week in
Oh,
my
awesome.
outstanding screener, so it's fresh in my mind. I quite enjoyed this film. In terms of the just the way that it's edited and sequenced, it's very gripping. It's very intense. I like that pretty much for the entirety of this film, you are deep in the throes of this newsroom, and that the live events are unfolding as they happen. And so I feel like in terms of films, because we've certainly had a lot of films in recent years that are about journalism and about the work that goes into it. Oftentimes it might be like a She Said, where it's you're following a long form piece as it's being investigated over several months, maybe over a year. With this one, I like that it's day of, this is everything that's going on. And it feels very true to what this profession is. I'm not in TV news myself. However, I do work for a daily newspaper. And when shit hits the fan, you just kind of have to be ready for it. And so I kind of like that this film is very much unflinching in that, in a way. And I wrote down that there are a few things that are always true in journalism. You never know what any given day will bring. There's a constant battle between being right and being first. And when all hell breaks loose, you have to strap in for the ride. And I feel like all three of those things are portrayed really, really well in this film, because there is always the argument that they're having. Do we broadcast this? But what happens if, I don't know, some violence happens? Are we going to be that station that shows that? We have unconfirmed reports. Do we feel comfortable with this, or do we wait until, we hear from some other officials and then risk being the last to announce this news? These are just all things that we have to consider in this industry. And so it's very cool to see something such as this shown. It very much is a very tragic event that unfortunately is unfolding in this film. But that's kind of when you get the best journalism, I think, because people know that they really have to be on top of it. They have to pull out all the stops in order to speak to the right people, to get the right types of coverage. And so I appreciated that from the professional journalist in me. And then just overall, I really thought that this had fabulous performances, especially from Jean and Peter and Leonie. And as I said, the editing was really, really great. So overall, I was quite a big fan of this film.
Yeah, I'm a fan as well. I really just like it when a journalism movie actually helps educate people about what journalism really is, but in an entertaining way. Sometimes I think journalism movies can be a little bit too glamorized. You have your movies like, I don't want to say like She Said, but maybe The Post is a little bit more closer to that. Not that I dislike that movie or anything, but it did give me a lot of pause, in terms of the takeaways that people might have from that one. But again, this is movie more in the vein for me like Spotlight, which I think really just shows the painstaking effort you have to put into in order to report things accurately, and all the different gray areas, how the hierarchies work. These are things that just the average person just doesn't have any context for. People think of the media as this very monolithic thing, and there's this knee jerk like, oh, I hate the media. And it's like, I hear that and I'm like, me too. But why do you? I get a little bit suspicious. I'm like, why do you hate the media though?
Right.
Because our reasons are probably completely different, especially because there are so many people in the industry who are so worthy of respect and really put so much work and so much meticulous care into the things that they are trying to, the information they are just trying to share, the transparency. And we don't hear about those things all the time because media is so different these days than it used to be. So it's useful to have a movie like this to it does show us like how far we have come, because the movie is very much an archival sort of, like they're using real footage of, I think it's the main anchor at the time, Jim McKay, I want to say, that's like actually the footage they used of the event. You see that like it's a chamber piece movie in the sense that we're always in the control room, and they do kind of add a little bit of the graininess to it. So it looks like, it doesn't look like it was made in the 70s, but it looks, closer than it would otherwise. And yeah, it just all the little details, all the little things they did. I was fortunate enough to talk to Tim Feldbaum yesterday and John Magaro as well. We were chatting about the movie. That interview will be on the feed after this. But yeah, when we were talking about it, I mean, he kept going on and on about all the little things they were able to like find because of like ABC was helping them out. Jeff Mason in real life was, had access to like all these like legitimate like 16 millimeter film reels that they were able to incorporate into the movie. And I just really appreciate like that represents to me the detail oriented nature of these people and how a film can properly translate that to an audience to kind of show you, like when you put this much effort into something and you don't half-ass it at all, it can be really good.
Absolutely. And, as you said too, it really does show you, it gives you like a peek behind the curtain, because as much as we like to think, well, I suppose I like to trust my journalists. I know that is not, that's not a given in many ways. However, when you are in this type of situation, and of course, my day-to-day work does not consist of covering the Olympics or covering a terrorist attack or anything of this nature.
Knock on wood, right?
I'm sorry.
Knock on wood.
Yes, please. But when we do have a incident in town where there is a lot of police activity, you do have to call the usual channels. You have to go out there. You have to see what you can. I mean, just a few months ago, I had to go out to the scene of a crime where it was found that 3 people were killed. Like 2 people were killed in a car, and then another body was found not too far away. And it's 4:55 p.m. and my shift's about to end in 5 minutes. And I was just like, all right, I guess I have to get in the car and go out there in the middle of the summer here and just try to figure out what the situation is. And so, yeah, it's just, you don't know where to go sometimes. You don't know who to call. You don't know who will be able to tell you anything. So I like that this is very much a boots on the ground approach with this topic.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that wave of anxiety when you're just going about your day to day, and then all of a sudden something just wild and unpredictable happens. I know literally the day before we did the interview it was in San Francisco, we got the tsunami warning thing.
Yes.
And so I was chatting a little bit with John Magaro about that. He was like, yeah, it was kind of surreal. Like we were showing up in the Bay Area, like they were going to do this like interview thing with, I forget what news station. And he was like, and then we just get this like tsunami warning. We don't know anything about it, but it's like kind of similar to in the movie when they're like, did you just hear gunshots? And like everyone's kind of like slowly trying to process that like something bad just happened. I think maybe,
It's always fun. And like I said, you never know what any given day, any minute will bring. You might have the easiest morning and you might be clocking in for a shift thinking, oh yeah, this is the quiet time where nothing happens. Oh, actually, everything is happening right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. You never know. And that was one of the things about this movie that really definitely stuck with me emotionally. And it's interesting because it's like, it's a thriller movie for sure. We've kind of mentioned like pacing is really good. It's good editing. It kind of just gets you from A to B very efficiently. If there's one thing that I think I've seen across some of the critical reactions to this movie, not just Venice, but more the folks who've been watching it over the last couple of weeks, I have noticed some folks have responded to, it tells the story. There is a lot of authenticity, but what really is the payoff? Does this movie avoid too much about, they made it before the October 7th terrorist attacks and then the ongoing war with Gaza. And so much of this movie, right, is in line with, of course, like these were terrorists who were trying to negotiate with the release of hostages. Like it echoes, things that are happening today very directly. And a lot of people have said like the movie doesn't really grapple with that. Is it fair to criticize it for that reason because it was made before the, October 7th, but this has been going on for so long? That is one of those gray areas where it kind of depends on you, the audience, how do you want to reckon with that? And that's a tough question to answer.
Yes, I've definitely seen a lot of people saying that, this was just in poor taste to release this film and to make this film. And again, I'm not sure when the production schedule was for this film.
They were working at, I think, like 2021, I want to say. Because Magaro mentioned that he met Mason during like the COVID lockdowns when they were doing the research.
I see. Okay, so yeah, 2 years before, 2+ years before things started happening in our current events. I guess for myself, I'm just kind of taking this film as is. And I feel like that's how I take a lot of films too. I mean, we all know, unfortunately, that a lot of actors who have been canceled or directors who have been canceled, they still make films and they're still in the limelight. And there are some people who like to critique them and their work in films along with that added context with what they know outside of the film space. I usually, just for anything, I like to just consider what I'm given. So although I do also acknowledge that the timing is, a bit questionable in many respects. So I don't want to disregard anyone's opinions on it. That's just kind of how I take this film and how I'm, looking at it.
Yeah, and I think there is a valid read of the film itself to say that like it is incomplete in that respect because it takes place over the course of a day, and it even is sort of about the word terrorism being a little bit more normalized, or it kind of reminded me of in Mindhunter when they're like the term serial killer is part of that show explaining the origin of it. And this is not the origin of the word terrorism, but one of the first instances of it being more globally recognized as a thing, because they have the whole conversation of like, are these guerrillas? Like, what is this? And I think the movie, to your point, it's a bit more interested, not really in the geopolitical nature of this specific conflict, but more so, what are the ethics of covering terrorism? Who does it really help? And really kind of shining a light on like the people making those decisions aren't always best equipped to make those decisions. They are in these extremely high pressure, volatile situations. And one thing I appreciate about the movie to that point is that I didn't feel like they were, I don't think it was in poor taste the way they were depicting what was happening, like the seriousness of it. There were times when the movie could have had a little bit of an Argo thing going on where it is kind of like a heist of like, we got to get the film reels to this person. How are we going to do it? And maybe like putting in like the soundtrack could have gotten a little bit more upbeat and positive. Like we'll figure it out. I think that would have been an egregious miscalculation. And I appreciated what the movie did not do in that respect. Like it did treat this as like, yeah, we'll be scrappy. We'll figure out how to tell the story, but we're not going to make light of a serious situation like this with such huge consequences.
And again, it goes into okay, if you were the first one to report this, then you better be 100% right to report things. And so that goes into the question, what terms are we using? And I feel like, I believe, newsrooms, whenever a situation such as this, some type of big event is happening, those are the conversations that are happening at that level. Are we labeling this as, for example, like covering the January 6th riots? Are you labeling that as like a domestic terrorist incident? Is that an insurrection? Like, what are the terms that you're trying to use as you yourself are still trying to figure out, like, how is this, who is like organizing this? How is this related? How is this, who are these people? And so, again, just another really good part of this film, learning as you're going and then trying to confirm as much as you possibly can.
I can agree more. This is what movies should do, even if they don't get everything 100% right in like a literal sense. Like I did have that moment where I was watching this because I was thinking, of course, of Steven Spielberg's Munich. And I was curious, like, how well do people remember that movie, first of all? Because obviously it spoils everything that happens in this. And I'm not sure how well people know the true events of this. It was 1972. It's a long time ago. And there is that factor. Like you can watch this movie knowing how it ends, but that's okay because that's not really what the movie's not hinging its dramatic question. It's like, the question isn't like, are the hostages going to be okay? It's way more about, is this newsroom going to be able to properly handle this like wild responsibility? And if they don't, why? If they do, how? That to me is way more interesting because we have engaged with this real life event before in cinema, but this is of course a totally different angle, totally different perspective, which is kind of cool to see But obviously, I think for some folks, it might be maybe not the movie they want. So I'm kind of curious, like, you know, once this does hit, like it's going to hit limited. It's going to be, I think, New York and LA and maybe some other spots. I'm not sure. But then when it goes wide in January, I know the awards conversation has it not really as a, in like the front runner for nominations for Best Picture, for example, but it's in the convo. It's like probably in like the next 5 under the top 10, something like that. I think that's where it is now. But what's your sense?
Yeah, I'm also kind of curious about where this goes, because I believe it was like a month or two ago, the Hollywood Reporter was predicting that this was winning Best Picture. And I think everybody said, come on now.
You sure about that?
Yeah.
Like the Tim Robbins saying, you sure about that? Yeah.
And so I guess I'm still trying to figure out what do I think will be winning next Best Picture at the Oscars. However, I do think that it's still fair to include this in the conversation because, again, certainly timeliness, although some people will say in a good way, others will say in a not good way. Again, that's a whole different conversation. But I think so many things work really well, especially the editing. I know that editing is usually like a good precursor when it comes to like what are the films that are really in serious consideration for winning Best Picture. And I feel like editing should definitely be a contender for this film just because it's so well paced. It gets in right under 2 hours. And I feel like there certainly are a few moments where there might be a little bit of a lull in terms of the momentum, but I would say that they are so far and few in between because there is always like some new incremental update that they have to get through. And something that I also really appreciate with this film, it's that everything that we see is what you would be seeing if you were a journalist there. So we're not seeing inside the hotel room or the Olympic Village rooms where these hostages are. We're not in the car or in the bus as they're being taken to the airport. We're not over on the other side of the fence of the airport. We're just constantly with the reporters. And I think that again, adds to that very accurate and realistic lens of what it is like to cover a situation such as this. So I just think that there are a lot of really smart decisions that are made throughout this entire film. And then, of course, very good performances that help anchor it in many, many different ways.
Yeah, even with, possibility for Leilani Benesh, possibly to get a Best Supporting Actress, maybe not Oscars, but, maybe a couple other, group awards groups. And yeah, that's a really good point because there is kind of like a stylistic flair to this movie that lends itself well, I think, to the awards groups, especially the Academy. It's not Nickel Boys, but it is, I think, like it's got like a bunch of different things going on for it, like you're saying. And I think there is, the thing I'm not totally sure is like, is it like an audience favorite? Like, is it something that will do pretty well in January for, is it going to have that kind of, because of its runtime, especially compared to other movies like Brutalist and Conclave, which I think Conclave will do really well with audiences, but a lot of these movies are getting pretty long. So I'm kind of curious if people are going to be like, well, I'll watch September 5th. I can wrap my head around what kind of movie this is, and they'll be pleasantly surprised by it. Like, I feel like it's an easy enough recommend for a lot of people.
I think so too. There is also the conversation, is this a film that people want to go to the theaters to escape for 2 hours?
Right.
Like, do you want to watch a thrilling, like, newsroom drama covering a terrorist attack at the Olympics involving, two nationalities that are very much involved in the current events conversation? I'm curious what people's mindset is with that.
I think that's why Conclave will probably do better, because I think people will appreciate that, like, yeah, Conclave is about something, but the stakes aren't quite so visceral. I mean, they are, but they're visceral for the characters. So it kind of does have that secret sauce. I think that's going to help it quite a bit. But yeah, so we normally play the Rotten Tomatoes game here. It's going to be a bit shorter since we don't have a lot of reviews counted, and we don't have CinemaScore and all that stuff. And I feel like it's way too premature to do average ratings on Letterboxd. But I'm curious if you can guess where it's at. We have 36 reviews counted. We just have the tomato meter. Nothing is set in stone. So this is going to be a wild guess, Emma. But what is your wild guess for September 5?
I would say maybe it's like upper 80s, low 90s. I'll throw out a 90%.
I like that chutzpah. I have a feeling it'll get closer to 90. Right now it's 83.
83, okay.
But, I could see it going up. I don't see it going down. I feel like this movie, it just has so many like good qualities to it. And even if you have like a negative, like I think there are plenty of valid criticisms that we kind of touched on, but still, it's like such a functionally like well done movie that I feel like people will give it some well due credit, especially for, John McGarrow is so good in it. And Peter Sarsgaard he has like, I think 2 moments in this movie that were really like floored me. But
he's a bad person to get on the phone with when there is breaking news going on, because he will yell at you.
yes. I did not like that simulation. It felt too real. Oh, and I remembered what I was going to bring up earlier about the menu and the hat trick thing.
Yes.
Okay. So we've been doing this thing lately where when we end the show, and because we usually it's me and Will and everything, or a guest or whatever, and like we talk about the movie, we give our opinions. But what we've been doing lately is we have been sharing the Letterboxd reviews from our friends of the show, people who've been on Cinemaholics before. So I was going to mention this because I was like, even though you haven't been on the show in a couple of years, the listeners know who you are, Emma, because we bring you up all the time because you're on our Letterboxd. And so you're basically like, if the listeners are like the children in our family, you're Aunt Emma,
Oh
it's
my
like,
gosh.
We've been hearing about you forever. And they're like, oh, finally, because we usually read your review. You watch so many things. So
that is so cute. Thank you so much for telling me. I love that. I love all my nieces and nephews, and you're all my children. Thank you for that. That is the kindest thing ever.
It works pretty well too, because it's like the holidays, so they finally got to see their Aunt Emma. And yes, Will and I are so happy to host you for late Thanksgiving. But yeah, let's take a look at some of the friends of the show who have posted a review. We don't have a ton as usual. We have some folks. You're on here, of course, too. You gave it 4 stars, and you already reviewed the film for us. So we don't have to go too far there. But a friend of the show, Aaron Dicer, gave it 3.5 stars. He's of course the host of Sif Pop, and he wrote a quick little review here. He said, "You've probably seen plenty on the hostage crisis from the Munich Olympics, but I doubt you've seen it solely from the perspective of the on-site ABC studio. That shift is enough to add a compelling insight to how journalists navigate tricky and inconsequential decisions as they unfold." That actually reminds me, Emma, the other movie I wanted to bring up here was Nightcrawler, which is like not a bad like double feature for this, because it's different enough, but it's talking about the same things in a different way that they kind of pair.
No, I like that. I co-sign on that.
Friend of the show, Isaac Feldberg, did not like this movie very much. He only gave it 2.5 stars. No review. I think he was like, my 2.5 stars, well, they'll speak for themselves there. Let's see here. I think we might have one more. Oh, yes. So friend of the show, Alex Billington, gave the movie 4.5 stars and a heart. And then finally, he's never been on the show before, but since he's a friend of yours because of Next Best Picture, Matt Neglia gave it 4 stars and a heart. And he has a whole review on Letterboxd, but I think he saw this at Venice because I'm seeing August 2024. And he wrote that September 5 is a thrilling and essential viewing experience, authentically capturing the horrors, sense of urgency, and small acts of heroism and mistakes made by media during the 1972 Munich Olympics massacre as events unfolded. Told entirely from the perspective of the broadcasting station, this one asks challenging questions without giving any easy answers. And there you go. That's about all we got there. I'm so curious how this one's going to do. And if there's just so many movies, Emma, that are like competing for that like December awards conversation.
And you know what? I really have been surprised with how many people have responded well to Conclave, because I thought that maybe a lot of people would be turned off by a stuffy Vatican type film, choosing the new pope,
But it's not stuffy. That was the thing. It ended up being delightfully wonderful and weird.
And, there was just so much little drama, and, who would have thought that cardinals, like these men who we consider like among the best of humans, were just such little mean girls and ready to poke fights and everything at each other.
I probably had a much less, but I know Will and I have had fun little conversations about this because he grew up Catholic. So he, certainly,
okay.
He brings that perspective in a way that I can't. But
I'm not a religious person myself either. I thought that they would be among the better ones. They have nice red robes, so I assume that they're good people.
Well, Emma, we'll leave it there since I know you got plenty of movies to catch. But thank you so much, of course, for coming on Cinemaholics. It's always a pleasure to have you. Hopefully, we can have you on again soon before next November. That would be nice. But we'll see. We'll see. I know the kids have been asking for Aunt Emma, but they might have to settle for your Letterboxd reviews for a while.
Well, I promise I will be back. I'm happy to be here every year for the holidays. I have to see my children. Yes, bringing the presents, bringing the joy. The crazy aunt is coming around. No, thank you for always having me. I really appreciate it. And just congrats on the continued success.
Thanks so much. And don't forget to check out more of Emma's work. We have a link to her Linktree where you can find all of her stuff that she's up to in the show notes, of course. So be sure to check that out. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody.